Welcome to the two-part series about French cars and their troublesome, almost French-like nature. There are a lot of global problems like climate change, poverty, mental health, and then French cars. But since this is a show where we only talk about things that actually matter, let us take a look at the byproduct of French existence and maybe even have fun while doing so. So let's take a look at the suspects. To be exact, there are roughly 10 cars. We will go over the cars semi-chronologically, but before this, let me start with a little history lesson. Mr. 47, would you kindly turn on the board? Rally started in France, but it would not be French, if it would make any sense. Thus the way of rallying was very different. Instead of regular stages, it was about navigating to points on a map, and the winner would be the one who takes the shortest route, or sometimes even the one who looks the coolest while driving, which makes a lot of sense of course. But this has later on evolved into Dakar Rally. But it does not mean Frenchmen did not create rally cars. For the rally, we all know and like. Let's start with the oldest and weirdest vehicular machine. Citroen DS. Let's be honest, if you look at the three horsemen of Dirt Rally starter pack, while Mini Cooper and Lancia Fulvia are both fighting between each other for the best in class, in the background, and when I mean in the background, I mean in a galaxy far, far away, reference to a movie I've never seen, is limping to the finish line this iconic looking Citroen DS. If you're looking to cut corners, looking like a Colin McRae, this is most certainly not the car to buy, since you will look more like Louis de Funès in a French movie of your choice. But it's inside where the Citroen will surprise you. You see, this remotely resembling machine has hydropneumatic suspension. Yes, this picture is not a Citroen DS, but at least it's just as far away from being a rally car as Citroen DS is. But back to the ride. It's smooth, the suspension suspends and emotionally damages even the toughest jumps of Finland. But aside from making jumps of Finland depressed, there is not much to be amazed by, at least not performance-wise. But inside the DS it's another story. It looks rather nice. Shifting that is implemented close to the steering wheel gives you a rare opportunity to see the entire shifting animation. And there is more. You can also experience, thanks to the suspension, what it feels like to sit on board Flight 93 as the plane leans from one side to another. This car is fun, and even more if you are a selfish French bastard, because everyone is going to look at your car going slow and looking pathetic. Meanwhile you inside will have enough comfort to cook a full course dinner. Vehicularly speaking, it is a regular longer wheelbase front wheel drive, which means it understeers under throttle. I find that it corners best when the wheels are locked full, right or left, and throttle as needed, just like with most front wheel drives in the Rally 2.0. Let's roll our way to the next car. Honestly, I first did not want to talk about this little boy's Peugeot 205 GTI, because it doesn't bring anything eye-catching to the table. It's an old Peugeot, but it does take a rather dominant place within its category, so it's worth mentioning since compared to the Golf, its competitor, it has less power but weighs a lot less. And if you look at the leaderboards, the healthy diet of this Peugeot does yield results. The interior looks like a regular 205, except someone let the door open and French Gypsy stole most of the interior. It's rather easy to drive, but most importantly, it is surprisingly nimble, thanks to its light weight. But like I said, there is really not much to elaborate on. Now we are finally getting somewhere. Renault Alpine 110 Senior. We are finally getting up to speed with this rear-wheel drive, which is lighter than a bag of chips. Body made with fiberglass and great aerodynamics most definitely make this car competitive even among more powerful cars. Sadly, the way how categories are mixed up in Dirt Rally prevents this car to reach its full potential, since cars like Ford Escort Mark II have drastically more horsepower. So that means that the only people who are going to drive this car are the real men of culture, and no insecure world record holders on Dirt Game subreddit. Interior is amazing, giving you full view of what is happening in front of the car and keeping it rather stylish without the need to skin a cow. Only slight negative thing about this car would be the first and second gear being a little bit too close to each other in a stock tune. I have actually over-revved the car at the start of this stage a bit. I think that this might even be the best car to learn how to drive a rear-wheel drive if you struggle with the concept of power being supplied from the back. It's very easy to monitor the angle of power slide, and even if you overcook it, you can easily fix it with just steering instead of screaming in panic, which usually doesn't help. So far so, this car is going for the best French car in the game. It also has plenty of well-placed rear mirrors, so if you decide to instead drive backwards, you can. But I'm not gonna do that. I have already had enough of this whimsical art of backwardistry. Let's also not forget, it is rather small, which means you won't be able to transport more than 2 cows' heads. But at least those 2 heads will be safe, since you're less likely to clip a rock in Argentina. If you wonder why this car is Renault Alpine 110 Senior, well, it's because there is the Renault Alpine 110 Junior, a modern version of this car, because Renault Alpine, let's be honest, made only one good car, and it is the 110. Although, what a car that is. But what goes up must come down, and thus, come on the stage, Renault 5 Turbo. Weighs 900 kilos and it has 285 horses. Trust me, these numbers are the only interesting thing about this car. Looks are subjective department, but we can objectively look at it like a matchbox with wheels. And it also happens to drive like one. While rear-wheel drive handling is difficult in snow environments, this is special in a bed more like special military operation bed. It's not fun. Gear values in stock have been put together using a roulette. Interior has not only been stolen, but also vandalized. It has been painted orange. And seeing this car go around corners looks just silly. It's like a shopping cart gone rallying with the gone wrong hashtag. But it is competitive, it does have the power to be on the top of those leaderboards, but this is not a car you would want to pick. Hell, I just drove it today for the first time. Simply, it's like syphilis, it's better to be avoided. On tarmac it's fine, but what rear-wheel drive isn't fine on tarmac? If someone looks at this car and thinks to himself that this looks good, it's probably the same person who would say to Münchener agreement, this looks good, but it does not look good. I mean the car, but also the agreement. Honestly, it's probably best to delete this car from your game. To do this, go to Properties on Steam, open file of the game in local files, and then go to Cars and find R5T file, and then delete it. The last car in the first part of the 2-part series is a car that is too cool for school, drives absolutely terribly. It's turbo, only works a part-time job, and sometimes the car has a tendency to murder people. But most importantly, it's part of Group B. This is Peugeot 205 D16. It's fast and dangerous, but unlike the Renault, this thing comes with a tag. Pair this, you filthy casual. This Peugeot is carefully balanced between being a half a car and half a war crime. Let's start with power. The Peugeot wheels, 480 horses with weight just under a ton. Yet all that power is useless if you do not keep the turbo awake. To keep those 480 horses under the hood, you need to do 2 things. First, keep on adding throttle regularly to keep the revs high. You can use clutch to assist you with that. And second, do not crash. That's easy, right? If you do happen to lose turbo pressure, it's best to floor the throttle and use clutch to kickstart turbos hard. And then step off the clutch, otherwise you will just keep the engine purring like a cat with no real power. Yes, it's a lot to keep in mind when it comes to this car, so that you will gladly ignore the cockpit looking dull. The only thing that sticks out is the huge turbo pressure gauge, which just reminds you that you should keep pedal to the metal. And the part-time employee that turbo is not the only difficult thing. the Peugeot tends to oversteer after you exceed certain angle of power slide, and understeers when the angle is too small. In other words, Mr. Peugeot likes power sliding only under very exact conditions, and if you make it angry, it is going to send you to the trees. And I should also mention that it is not exactly sturdy, and it is rather easy to damage than, for example, our 5 category cars. The view out of the cockpit is good as long as you keep the view right side up. And when you decide to step on it, the steering capabilities worsen since the wheels are going to get pushed upwards due to the insane acceleration, making it just another thing on the list of demands that this Peugeot enforces, otherwise it's the tree. I would actually say that this car looks good unless someone removes the rear wing, or you just do it yourself with some acrobatics. It's not exactly satisfying to drive, since it is more like operating a rocket, but it will keep you occupied, mildly said. Overall, you should try this. Just expect to die, and it won't surprise you. Okay lads, this sums it up for the first part of the 2-part series. The next episode is not coming straight away, since I will probably dive into the topic of how EA ruins video games and why we might or might not need to be concerned about the future of Dirt Rally 3.0 or WRC game. However, they decide to call it. And until then, you can write a comment about how Renault 5 Turbo is actually a good car with those parodies you filthy casual vibes. Or you can subscribe, since it is the only way to ensure the future of this channel, because right now the future is not looking golden. So let's make it golden.